My name is David Kaaret. I'm here today as part of a series of talks on MarkLogic financial services use cases. Each of these talks focuses on a specific use case where MarkLogic offers clear benefits and has real-world experience. Today, we're talking about handling complex financial data sets and are using derivatives as an example. MarkLogic has quite a bit of experience with derivatives. In fact, a major derivatives dealer uses MarkLogic as its derivatives repository. When it became necessary to bring together the firm's derivatives books into a single whole after the financial crisis of 2008, the modeling effort would have been prohibitive with the firm's legacy approaches, so MarkLogic was brought in. As seen from this slide and press release from the DTCC, the challenges posed by derivatives continue. They did not go away after 2008. So what's special about derivatives? Fundamentally, derivatives are the most complex class of financial instruments. There are many types of derivatives, and each has its own implied data model. In part because of this complexity, different classes of derivatives are handled by different desks, each with its own independent systems. For some types of derivatives, especially those traded over the counter, the characteristics needed to change to describe individual trades changes over time, requiring changes to the underlying data model. All of this makes building a consolidated derivative hub an extremely difficult task. However, it's one that needs to be done. Today, risk analysis needs to be done on a firm-wide basis instead of at the desk level like before. Government demands that trade surveillance and regulatory reporting be done at a consolidated level. So to get an idea of how MarkLogic can help with handling complex derivatives, let's take a look at a vanilla swap in MarkLogic. The first thing to note is this vanilla swap looks almost exactly the same as the FPML document from which it came. This because MarkLogic stores data as is. So now, let's take a look at how that same derivative looks like in a relational model. It takes 14 different tables to model the swap. This has enormous implications. If you try to implement a derivative system with relational technology, even if you limit yourself to only dealing with vanilla swaps, on the input side you need to create 14 tables, write ETL code to decompose the swaps, perform 14 separate inserts to store each swap. On the query side, to reconstruct a swap, you need to write a SQL join command that joins 14 different tables. All of this will drag out development time for writing the data model and the ETL code, and it'll hurt your runtime performance by forcing the system to decompose and recompose the swaps. Also, the complex data model means the system cannot be directly accessed by business users. They will not have the ability to do the complex SQL needed to pull together a swap. And that's just for a vanilla swap. There's hundreds of derivative types, every one of which has a different underlying data structure. With MarkLogic, things are quite different. To store a swap is a single insert. To retrieve a swap is a single get command. So being able to store individual trades is not by itself enough to justify using MarkLogic as a platform for a derivatives hub. That could easily be done with Hadoop or a number of other approaches. It's also necessary to be able to easily query and access the data. So let's move from slides to MarkLogic itself and take a look at what MarkLogic has to offer. Okay, so let's get into MarkLogic. So this is the MarkLogic Query Console. The first thing to notice is, or take into account, this will not be generally what you expose your end users to. This is just to show you how easy it is. Everything we're going to do here is going to be SQL or JSON, all very common programming techniques, so it's easy to put a front end onto this. So we've already loaded a number of documents into the system. And so basically there's 1,242. Each of these is from fpml.org. So every Every trade here is a different type of message, so everyone has a different underlying schema, and we're going to show you how to treat all of these different things as a whole. And as you can see here, there's a lot of different types of data for different data processing, and there's swaps, and there's record keeping stuff. So FPML is a very complex standard that covers everything, equity options, all different kinds. So in our earlier we were talking about how one benefit of MarkLogic is that retrieving a trade is extremely simple compared to doing it in a really normalized system. So all you need is a single command. So what happens here is you do your search or your retrieval, you grab it, and the entire document, the entire swap is there. And one thing to notice is MarkLogic does put some header information to let you know where the data came from, who imported the data, and everything else. And then once we get to this instance tag down below, then it becomes exactly the same as it was in the FPML message. So the entire thing is there, it's all fully accessible. Now let's talk about, without doing a single instance of data modeling, without spending any time at all, what can you do with MarkLogic? So here's an example of doing a search in MarkLogic. So this is a Google style search, except that it's more than that. So we'll come through here and do the search. Everything where trade 1, 2, 3, 4 occurs in the document. And there's a lot of stuff here, but I'm showing, you don't have to show this to your users, but it's showing you the things where the search term was found. And the key thing to keep in mind is that MarkLogic is a world-class search engine. So it does the score, the fitness, it tells you which parties met it, and it has confidence ratings. And so this is all fully configurable, setting up. So this is Google quality, elastic quality search, that you get that out of the box. Anything you can do there, so you can just quickly go search through all of your documents as a single whole, find stuff. And there's use cases where this matters. That, for example, generally to go from the idea of a trade to the final settlement, it'll go through 4 or 5 different systems. And suppose in system 4 an error comes up. So you don't know whether that error actually occurred in system 4 if you're just surfacing an error that occurred in system 1 or 2. And so with just this technology alone, you can just dump all the trades into a single hole and then just do searches, have them all pop up, and then your domain experts can go through there and figure out what went wrong with the trade. And so what happens today at banks is when they do this kind of system, they have to give logins to each of the underlying systems and have their domain experts understand how to query and access each of those systems, go in there, access it, pull it out, and then search it. And if you could just take it and stick it in MarkLogic and just do this kind of free text search, you could have them up and running, and they wouldn't have to have the expertise in each of the underlying systems. They would just need the domain expertise to understand it. So you can make the job of handling trade exceptions and other similar things far, far easier than they would be before. So that's a big benefit. Now that's just free text searching. That's obviously not limited to MarkLogic, but what starts to really differentiate MarkLogic is our universal index. So with MarkLogic, we allow you to take any incoming, when we insert the data, we treat the attributes in the data as being data. So if there's a field called gender, an attribute called gender that has a value of female, you never have to explain to MarkLogic that there's a data model and there's an attribute called gender. Instead, we just import that and take that as data. So without ever explaining to MarkLogic what gender is, you can immediately start doing queries and say, show me all the documents or records where gender equals female or gender equals male. And so here's an example of that. So we're just coming in there and finding where the query sent by equals party ABI. And so that's just very quick, easy to do. And there it is, there's your list. And so we're just outputting the list of the documents that meet that, but you could output different information, you could show the whole thing. And so now this is something where even without a data model, without going through all the trouble, your domain experts are able to very quickly and easily access this data in powerful ways. And so now the next step is structured queries against numbers or dates. And so this is becoming, you have to do something akin to data modeling here. So I had to go in and define an index on the date. But so now this is letting me search for everything greater or everything earlier than a specific date, all the trades that happened that were less than a date. And then if I just change this, I can quickly come in there and make it all the trades that are greater than a date. And so again, you didn't have to do any data modeling except define an index on the type, because the one limitation of the universal index is it only does equality. So you can say, show me everything where it's equal to ABC, but the universal index doesn't let you do things, show me everything greater than 50,000. But simply by going through and identifying a few attributes that are critically important, you can come in there, you can do it, you can make it work and start accessing your data. So this is the power of MarkLogic, handling extremely complex data sets that your domain, people who understand the domain or even who don't necessarily fully understand the domain can start doing data discovery, start finding what's there without doing this complex and difficult data modeling and ETL process. So it's very good for iterative development where you try out ideas, you explore them, you make them work, and you come in there and do it. So that's one part of MarkLogic. Now the next thing is your users are going to want SQL access to data. That's just the reality. All the BI tools expect to get the data in a grid. All the machine learning tools expect to get the data in the grid, and everything we've shown you so far is you're actually seeing XML, you're seeing JSON, you're seeing lists of documents, and so that doesn't do it. And so here we start to get into data modeling, but it's not the data modeling of relational where you have to model every attribute of every row of every table before, and then write ETL before you can start. Instead, what MarkLogic does is it allows you to do agile data modeling. So what you can do is you just can define regularities in your data. So you go and create a template, and it's pretty easy to do once you understand how to do it. So you come in here and you simply create a SQL view. So we're going to create a SQL view called FPML mix because we have all different kinds of mixed messages, and you define what attributes you want that to have, message ID, and then you explain where it's located in the FPML documents. And you can limit what's coming in there with the context command. So we're saying that we only want things that are of type request confirmation, so MarkLogic won't bother limiting itself. You can also do it before you get to it. You can say only things that are located in certain directories or that are in what we call different collections. And then you come through and create your SQL view of those attributes you want. And so a key thing is there'll be hundreds of different attributes in the FPML documents. And every FPML message type will have a different set of attributes in it. But so you can create these SQL views that cover lots of different parts of what's going on and then create them. And then now against this complex data that you've seen before, that we saw over here with the individual document. So we take this kind of data that's, complicated, all kinds of indents, everything else, and we can come over here. Now you have SQL access to that data. And so you can, all of the power of SQL there, this can be exposed through ODBC, it's immediately accessible. And so there it is. So, and creating these FPML, these TE templates is once you've learned it and got it set up, you can do it in an hour or two. So you can take the complex data that would take, literally years to do in a relational system to model all the elements, and then in a day start churning out all the different SQL views of the data your analysts and others need. And so they just have access to what they need, and you don't need to worry about all of the complexity of everything else. You only go to that when you get to it. In this presentation, we've covered some of the strengths MarkLogic brings to handling complex data sets like derivatives. However, what we covered today is only a fraction of what MarkLogic brings to the table. MarkLogic provides a complete framework for integrating and making complex and diverse datasets accessible. This includes data harmonization with a UI-driven process that allows you to do agile data modeling and harmonize those parts of your data that you immediately need in a very friendly way. It involves smart mastering, which does data deduplication, allowing you to find which records refer to the same entity, advanced semantics that allows the use of ontologies and other kinds of semantics to make self-service access to complex data possible to your business and other users, and much, much more. So this is the first in a series, and these other capabilities we will be discussing far more at length in future presentations and future talks. So I hope you come back for more. Thank you.